Andrew Williamson here. Welcome back to Williamson Education. Well, we've been looking at sentences in this last lesson, and specifically, we've looked at one of the things that can go wrong with sentences. A run-on sentence, a common type of sentence error, occurs when two or more independent clauses are joined without proper punctuation, conjunctions, or a combination thereof. Today, we'll examine a second common type of sentence error called the sentence fragment. I like to think of run-on sentences and sentence fragments as two sides of the same coin, meaning that they are related but different kinds of sentence error. A run-on sentence has too much sentence, meaning that it has more independent clauses than a single sentence can support. A sentence fragment, on the other hand, has too little sentence, meaning that it has fewer independent clauses than a single sentence should have. You will see what I mean by this statement as we go on in today's class. Broadly speaking, a sentence fragment is a group of words that has no independent clause or that has a dependent subject-verb pair. It is missing a properly conjugated main subject-verb pair in an independent clause, or has a properly conjugated subject-verb pair in a subordinate clause unattached to another main independent clause. It is in this regard that a sentence fragment has too little sentence. It is missing the major elements that are required for an independent clause to become an independent clause. A run-on sentence has two or more independent clauses. A sentence fragment has none. Let's take a look at a couple of examples of sentence fragments in order for you to understand better what I mean by the term. As we also saw with run-on sentences, the problem of sentence fragments is primarily one that occurs in writing. People actually speak in sentence fragments all the time, and no one knows the difference. But when it comes to writing, we need to make sure to eliminate all of the fragments from our prose. Here's a first example of a fragment. The man cooking dinner over the open flame. Notice how in this group of words we are missing some key information. We don't have any main verb in the group of words. While I might guess that the author of these words has included a subject, the man, the author has also neglected to include a main verb in the phrase. Because of this missing main verb, the phrase must be a sentence fragment. Let's look at another example. Here it is. Although my body was sore after the long flight. This fragment is a bit different from the previous one, but it is still a fragment. Notice that in this fragment, we actually have a proper subject-verb pair in the group of words. My body was sore. But this subject-verb pair is preceded by a subordinating conjunction, although. That subordinating conjunction, although, makes what would otherwise be an independent clause into a dependent one. As we saw in earlier lessons, a dependent clause all alone does not make a full sentence. We must attach that dependent clause to an independent clause in order for it to function properly. A key theme here between these two examples is this. Something is missing in both sentences. Something is missing. And that's actually what makes a fragment, the fact that something essential is missing from the group of words. In normal everyday speech, a fragment is a broken piece of some physical object with sharp, irregular edges. A fragment of glass might cut your finger. A fragment of wood might give you a splinter. Fragments are objects that have broken edges and that are missing some key elements. Be careful with sentence fragments. These reflections raise the obvious question. How do you identify a sentence fragment? Unfortunately, there's not really a great answer to this question. You have to know when a sentence is missing some key information. Maybe the sentence is missing a subject, or maybe it is missing a main verb. Maybe the sentence has both of these components but is transformed into a dependent clause by a subordinating conjunction. In all three of these cases, you would have a sentence fragment on your hands. Just as there are several ways to form a sentence fragment, so there are many different ways to correct one. How to correct a sentence fragment depends a lot on how the fragment was formed in the first place. Are you missing that main subject? Revise the sentence to add a main subject. Missing that main verb? Add a main verb to your group of words. What about if you have a dependent clause with a subordinating conjunction at the beginning? Well, then you'll need to add an independent clause either before or after your dependent one. In all cases, though, fixing a sentence fragment involves adding something that was missing back into the sentence. I mentioned a moment ago that sentence fragments primarily occur in writing rather than in speaking. It's not that people don't speak in sentence fragments, it's that audiences are much more willing to forgive grammatical errors when they occur in speech than when they occur in writing. Writing leaves a physical record for us to look at and examine for some time. If a mistake occurs in writing, that mistake remains on the page for the reader to see, ponder, and critique. If it occurs in speech, on the other hand, the error is temporary, impermanent, and fleeting. All of this means that while we must correct sentence fragment errors in writing, we are rather apt to let them slide in speaking. And believe me, sentence fragment errors occur all the time in speech. In fact, they probably occur more often in speaking than they do in writing. Speech, as we know, is more casual and informal, writing more formal and refined. It's helpful in speech to be able to interject your ideas quickly into a conversation. This need often means speaking in short, clipped phrases that do not form full sentences. In other words, what is an error in writing may prove desirable or even necessary in speaking. There are clearly different rules for how to write and how to speak in this strange language of ours. Imagine, for instance, that I was having a conversation with a friend about going on a day trip to the beach. My friend is telling me all about the last time he went to the beach and got a bad sunburn. He just keeps going on and on and on about how bad the sunburn was, and I'm getting tired of hearing about it. I might finally interject, which is why I recommend you wear sunscreen. See what I did there? I did not speak in a full sentence. I spoke in a fragment. I did so for a couple of reasons, but mainly so that I could interject my own thoughts into the long train of speaking that my friend had been engaged in. Speaking in fragments can be very helpful for interjecting your own ideas into an ongoing conversation, even if it is not technically grammatically correct to do so. At the core, sentence fragments are incomplete thoughts in English language writing. As I mentioned in the past, the English language does not come with a user's manual. There is no definitive set of rules that define the key terms and ideas that give our language its structure. What constitutes a complete thought? How about an incomplete thought? To be honest, I find it rather difficult myself to define these two essential concepts in a way that will be useful in a wide range of circumstances. Sure, you can say that a complete thought has a subject and a properly conjugated verb. You can say that a complete thought does not begin with a subordinating conjunction, unless it also has another independent clause attached to it. You can say these kinds of things, and you'll be right to say them. But these rules about forming a complete thought do not seem to me to be sufficient. In the most recent example of fragment that I gave you, you will find both a subject-verb pair and no subordinating conjunction. Yet the fragment is still a fragment. The truth is that fragments come in all shapes and sizes. There are so many shapes and sizes that it would be impossible to formulate a single rule or a small set of rules covering all of the cases. You'll need to train yourself through experience reading high-quality prose in English in order to understand when an idea has become complete and when it remains incomplete. Remember, when it comes to run-on sentences and sentence fragments, the problems arise primarily in the written word. Experience training your reading and writing skills in an immersive English environment will become more important than ever. With that, we come to the end of our lesson on sentence fragments. I'll see you right here next time for a class on redundancy. Spread the word.